Verdun, France, 1916. In the Section 8 psychiatric ward, 47 men gouged out their own eyes at precisely 3:15 a.m., all whispering the same woman's name. I am the War Maestro, and tonight I bring you the classified medical records of a military hospital where soldiers feared sleep more than German artillery, because something walks the ward when doctors aren't watching. February 1916 saw the beginning of what would become the greatest slaughterhouse in military history. The Battle of Verdun pitted the German and French armies against each other in a relentless meat grinder that would eventually claim over 700,000 lives. By June, the battle had consumed nearly 500,000 men, with thousands more arriving daily to replace the dead. French commanders had instituted their infamous rotation system. Almost 3/4 of all French soldiers would eventually serve at Verdun, each man knowing his tour at the front meant probable death or maiming. The psychological toll proved even more devastating than anticipated. The French army created specialized Section 8 wards for men whose minds had shattered under constant artillery bombardment. Medical records from the Service de Santé des Armées documented over 9,000 cases of what doctors called la confusion mentale des tranchées, what we now recognize as severe combat trauma. Capitaine Lucien Moreau arrived at the Tavannes Field Hospital on June 17th, medical bag in hand, ears ringing from the never-ending artillery barrage that vibrated through the converted monastery's stone walls. A decorated psychiatrist from Salpêtrière Hospital, Moreau had volunteered after his younger brother returned from Fort Douaumont as nothing more than a trembling shell, eventually shooting himself during a night terror. An orderly rushed past carrying bloody bandages. 3 more for the graveyard, he muttered, and 6 for your ward doctor. The hospital administrator emerged from the surgical wing, hands still stained crimson despite vigorous scrubbing. Capitaine Moreau, at last. Your predecessor lasted exactly 17 days before hanging himself. Left nothing but a journal filled with patient observations and other nonsense. He thrust a leather-bound book into Moreau's hands, the 3rd doctor to die. The others simply lost their minds. Moreau opened the journal to find frantic handwriting that deteriorated with each page. The final entry caught his eye. Circled repeatedly in red ink were the words, "She doesn't leave until they forget themselves." Your patients, the administrator continued, unlocking a heavy iron door labeled Section 8, aren't typical shell shock cases. We've separated the worst here. The door swung open to reveal 20 beds. Men sat rocking, mumbling, or simply staring at walls with vacant eyes. One soldier captured Moreau's attention immediately, a young man methodically scratching the same pattern into his forearm with a fingernail, drawing tiny beads of blood without flinching. Soldat Jean Dumont, the administrator whispered. Sole survivor of a direct hit on Trench 301. Hasn't spoken since they pulled him from the rubble. Found surrounded by his entire squad, all dead with their eyes gouged out. I'll begin evaluations immediately, Moreau said, hiding his revulsion. The administrator nodded, already walking away. A final warning, Capitaine. Every single patient reports a nightly visitor, a woman in a blood-soaked veil, always at 3:15. We've posted guards, installed locks. No one enters yet. He shrugged. Welcome to Verdun. Not all the monsters are German. After the administrator departed, Moreau stood alone among his new patients, the weight of their vacant stares pressing against him like physical force. He adjusted his spectacles and opened the leather journal. The first entries were meticulous clinical observations, the handwriting precise and professional, but as the pages progressed, the script grew increasingly erratic. Words crowded together, sentences abandoned mid-thought, strange diagrams appearing in margins. Nurse Clemence appeared at his side, a stern-faced woman with calloused hands and eyes that had witnessed too much suffering to maintain any softness. Capitaine, I've prepared dossier 42 as requested. Soldat Dumont's case file. Moreau accepted the folder, surprisingly thick for a single patient. The administrator mentioned protocols regarding a nocturnal visitor. Clemence's face tightened. We lock the ward at 2,000, 100 hours, no exceptions. 2 orderlies remain posted outside until morning rounds at 600. No one enters or leaves. She hesitated. And yet, go on. Every night, at precisely 315 hours, the patients become agitated. Many scream. Some attempt self-harm. Dumont is always the worst. Clemence lowered her voice. They claim a woman visits them. Always the same description. Tall, wearing a blood-soaked nursing veil. She whispers to them. Mass hysteria is common in traumatized patients, Moreau said confidently, particularly those sharing confined quarters. With respect, doctor, I've treated shell shock cases since 1914. This is different. Clemence gestured toward the western wall. The prior physicians installed a camera to document the disturbances. The photographs are in your office. Moreau followed her through a small door into what would be his private office. The space was Spartan, a desk, a filing cabinet, and a cot for nights when leaving the ward was impractical. What caught his attention immediately were the walls. Every surface was covered with precisely drawn geometric patterns, identical to those Dumont scratched into his skin. Did Benoit do this? Moreau asked, running his fingers over the etchings. No, doctor. Your predecessors all reported the same phenomenon. The patterns appear overnight. We whitewash the walls weekly. Clemence pointed to a small cabinet. The photographic equipment and developed plates are there. Left alone, Moreau opened dossier 42. The first page contained Dumont's service record, 22 years old, decorated for bravery at Douaumont in March. Sole survivor of an artillery strike on Trench 301 on April 27th. Found unconscious among 7 dead comrades, all with self-inflicted ocular trauma. Moreau flipped through pages of medical assessments until he found a transcript of Dumont's admission interview, the last time he had spoken. The young soldier's testimony sent chills down his spine. In the interview, Dumont described seeing a woman outside their trench before the artillery strike. She had stood in the pouring rain, watching them, dressed in a blood-soaked nurse's uniform. His comrades assumed she was from the aid station despite the peculiarity of her presence so close to the front line. When questioned further, Dumont revealed that after the shell explosion knocked him unconscious, he awoke to find the mysterious woman inside their collapsed dugout. She moved methodically, from soldier to soldier, while they screamed and clawed at their own eyes. To each man she whispered something, but when she reached Dumont, she delivered a different message. He alone would be the witness. The transcript ended with Dumont's agitated response when asked what he was meant to witness. His words were scrawled in the physician's increasingly frantic handwriting. She was here before, in the other war. They forgot her, buried her with the others when they built on the mass grave. But she remembers everything beneath this hospital. Moreau closed the file, a chill spreading through his body despite the summer heat. He turned to the wall, studying the precise patterns Dumont continued to recreate. Not random geometry after all, but something unsettlingly familiar, a map of the hospital grounds and the trench network surrounding it. Dusk settled over the hospital as the distant thunder of artillery provided a grim lullaby. Moreau had spent the afternoon interviewing each patient, documenting symptoms far more severe than typical shell shock cases. 10 men refused to speak at all. 6 spoke only in fragmented whispers about her, while 4 others had developed violent tremors that intensified as evening approached. After dinner in the officers' mess, Moreau returned to his office and examined the photographic plates left by his predecessor. Most showed only empty beds or sleeping patients. but one image from April 13th stood out, taken at 3:16 a.m. According to the notation, it showed all patients sitting upright, facing the western wall. Their expressions were uniform, a terrible serenity that looked more like death than peace. Moreau decided scientific observation was necessary. At 11:00 p.m., he dismissed the orderlies, assuring them he would maintain the night watch personally. Once alone with his sleeping patients, he prepared the camera, loaded a fresh plate, and positioned it to capture the western wall where the mysterious patterns continually appeared. "You won't see her in photographs," came a voice from the darkness. Moreau spun around to find Soldat Dumont watching him, fully awake, his eyes reflecting the dim lamplight. It was the first time the young soldier had spoken since his admission interview. "Soldat Dumont," Moreau said gently, approaching the bed. "You've decided to speak. Only because you need to understand," Dumont whispered. His fingers were raw from scratching patterns, skin torn to reveal red flesh beneath. "She doesn't appear to instruments, only to eyes. This woman you believe you see. Not belief, knowledge." Dumont's voice took on a strange cadence, like reciting from memory. "Her name was Marie Fournier, volunteer nurse with the Red Cross during the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. This hospital was a field aid station back then. When typhoid broke out, they accused her of poisoning the water supply." Moreau froze. Nothing in Dumont's file indicated knowledge of the hospital's history. "French officers executed her without trial," Dumont continued, his eyes fixed on the empty space by the western wall. "Buried her with the mass graves beneath us. 47 soldiers. She remembers each name, each face." The walls seemed to contract around them as Dumont spoke. The artillery barrage had ceased completely, an unnatural silence falling over the ward. "They built this new hospital in 1915 atop the unmarked graves," Dumont whispered. "Disturbed the dead. Now she visits us. The broken men no one believes, men whose minds are already half destroyed." Moreau struggled to maintain his clinical detachment. "And what does she want from you, Soldat?" Dumont's eyes finally met his. "Recognition. She whispers the names of the dead into our ears, makes us see what happened to her. She won't rest until someone remembers." The temperature in the room plummeted suddenly. Moreau could see his breath misting in the air, though June nights in Verdun were warm. "It's 3:14, Dumont said, looking at the doctor's pocket watch with an expression of infinite sadness. "She's coming. Don't look directly at her, doctor. She'll make you her witness, too." Around them, other patients began stirring in their beds, whimpering like children. The lamp flame sputtered, dimming the room to near darkness. In the shadows, Moreau sensed movement, a tall figure passing between beds, pausing at each. The sound of soft whispering filled the ward, words just beyond comprehension. Then the lamp went out completely. Dawn broke over Verdun, revealing a carnage of a different kind. Moreau found himself on the floor of the ward, medical jacket torn, his wristwatch frozen at 3:15 a.m. The patients lay motionless in their beds, not dead, but in states of catatonia so profound they barely seemed to breathe. Only Dumont sat awake, methodically scratching new patterns into the wall beside his bed. "What happened last night?" Moreau asked, his voice hoarse as though he'd been screaming. Dumont didn't turn. "You saw her. Now you're part of it." Nurse Clemence burst through the door with 2 orderlies, her face pale with shock. "Capitaine." The night staff reported screams, but the door was locked from inside. "We've been trying to enter for hours." Moreau steadied himself against a bed frame. "The patients need sedation, all except Dumont." As the medical staff administered chloral hydrate to the agitated men, Moreau retreated to his office. The camera stood untouched, but when he developed the photographic plate, it showed only an empty ward. He rubbed his temples, fighting against a splitting headache and fragmented memories that made no logical sense. Whispers in his ear, a cold hand on his shoulder, visions of a mass grave being dug beneath a field hospital flying the tricolor of France. After ensuring the patients were stabilized, Moreau left the hospital grounds. The summer air was thick with the stench of rotting flesh and cordite as he made his way to the command post of the 47th Medical Corps. A harried lieutenant provided him access to the historical archives. Records from the Franco-Prussian War, the records officer asked incredulously. Most were destroyed in the initial German bombardment, Capitaine. I need information on this specific location, the hospital at Tavannes. The officer rummaged through cabinets of yellowed papers. There is something. He produced a water-damaged folder. Inventory records from 1870. 1. This area was an advanced dressing station during the Battle of Sedan. Moreau pored over the faded documents. Most contained mundane details of medical supplies and casualty figures until he came upon a terse report. Volunteer nurse M. Fournier executed by firing squad, 12 October 1870, for suspected espionage and sabotage of medical supplies. Buried with casualties in common grave, map reference 47C. His hands trembling, Moreau compared the coordinates with current maps. The mass grave lay directly beneath the psychiatric ward. Further documents revealed more disturbing details. 47 French soldiers had died of typhoid at the aid station shortly before Nurse Fournier's execution. The investigating officer noted her protestations of innocence and the lack of formal trial, but wartime expediency had prevailed. A final page caught his eye, a physician's private letter expressing doubts about Fournier's guilt. The volunteer nurse could not have contaminated the water supply as alleged. I fear we have executed an innocent woman. The men speak of her in their fever dreams, claiming she visits them at night. Mass delusion, certainly, yet I myself dreamt of her last evening. She stood by my bed at precisely 3:15 a.m., whispering names I did not know but somehow recognized. Returning to the hospital as evening approached, Moreau found Nurse Clémence attending Dumont, who had begun speaking freely, but only about Marie Fournier. She comes through the western wall, Dumont explained calmly. Where the old trench collapsed into the mass grave, the shells opened a passage. Clémence caught Moreau's eye. He's been repeating these stories all day. Not stories, Moreau said quietly. I found records confirming Nurse Fournier's execution in 1870. The mass grave is exactly where he claims. Clémence's professional composure cracked. Then you believe. I believe something happened to these men that our medical training cannot explain. Moreau showed her his pocket watch, still frozen at 3:15. Something that's happening to me now. The hospital transformed after nightfall. Shadow and lamplight played across stone walls, and the never-ending artillery barrage created tremors that sent medical instruments rattling on metal trays. Moreau had not slept since his discovery in the archives. His clinical rationality warred with the evidence mounting before him, evidence that something unnatural walked the psychiatric ward each night. You should not stay tonight, Nurse Clémence advised, preparing evening medications. Her usually steady hands trembled slightly. The patients are worse than I've ever seen them. Indeed, the men had deteriorated rapidly. 3 had gouged bloody furrows into their faces with fingernails. 2 others had been restrained after attempting to blind themselves with pencils smuggled from the recreation room. All 19 patients, excluding Dumont, now exhibited identical symptoms: tremors, mutism, and extreme photosensitivity. I need to understand what's happening, Moreau insisted. He showed her the journal of his predecessor. Benoit documented the same progression. Look at this entry. The patients speak of memories that aren't their own. Battlefield scenes from 1870, experiences of men long dead. They describe typhoid symptoms they've never experienced. They know names they could not possibly know. Clemence crossed herself. I've worked field hospitals since Marne. Science explains shell shock, but this. She paused, gathering courage. I've seen her too, Capitaine. Reflections in windows, glimpses in mirrors, a nurse in an old-fashioned uniform, her face hidden beneath a blood-stained veil. Moreau felt something cold settle in his stomach. When? Last night, in the surgical ward mirror. She stood behind me while I was dressing wounds, but when I turned, no one was there. I heard her whisper a name, Auguste Mercier. That name means nothing to me, nor to me, until I checked the record room this morning. Clemence handed him a brittle sheet of paper. Auguste Mercier, Captain, 104th Infantry. Died of typhoid, October 1870, one of the 47. Outside, the artillery intensified as night fell completely. Moreau sent Clemence home against her protests and ordered the orderlies to remain outside the ward. He locked himself in with the patients, determined to face whatever came at 3:15 a.m. As midnight approached, Dumont became increasingly agitated. She's angry tonight, Doctor. You disturbed her rest by uncovering her story. I want to help her, Moreau said, unsure if he truly believed his own words. No one helped her, Dumont replied. They stood her against the wall there. He pointed to the western wall, where the patterns appeared nightly. 7 officers formed the firing squad. Their commander gave the order, and their rifles tore her apart. She was still alive when they threw her into the mass grave. The other patients began moaning in unison, a low, keening sound that raised the hair on Moreau's neck. He checked his pocket watch. 2:58 a.m. She doesn't want help, Dumont whispered. She wants witnesses. She makes us see through the eyes of the dead soldiers, feel their fevers, experience their final moments. Relive her execution over and over. Each night we see more. Each night more of our minds belongs to 1870. The temperature plummeted. Frost crystallized on the water glasses beside each bed. Moreau's breath clouded before him as his watch ticked toward 3:15. What happens when we've seen everything? Moreau asked. Dumont smiled, a terrible expression devoid of happiness. We join them. Your predecessor understood. So will you. The lamps extinguished simultaneously. In the darkness, Moreau heard soft footfalls, a woman's shoes on stone. The sound circled the room, pausing by each bed. Patients began screaming, thrashing against restraints. Then silence fell, complete, absolute silence that even the distant artillery could not penetrate. In this vacuum of sound, Moreau felt her presence behind him, cold breath against his neck, the rustle of a starched nurse's uniform, the metallic scent of blood. Marie Fournier, he whispered. The mirror on his desk reflected a tall figure standing behind him, a woman in a nurse's uniform from another era, her face obscured by a veil dark with old blood. Slowly, she raised her hands to lift the veil. Morning found Capitaine Moreau huddled in the corner of his office, uniform torn, face lacerated with self-inflicted scratches. The night staff discovered him at dawn, muttering names of men long dead, reciting details of battles he had never witnessed. His medical training fought desperately against what he had experienced. The lifting of the veil, the face beneath, the whispered histories of 47 soldiers. He needs to be removed from the ward, the hospital administrator declared, watching as orderlies sedated the struggling physician. Just like Benoit, just like all the others. Nurse Clemence disagreed. He's seen something real. She held up Moreau's notebook, filled overnight with frantic scribbling, detailed accounts of the 1870 field hospital, precise descriptions of typhoid symptoms, and endless repetitions of Marie Fournier's name. For 3 days, Moreau drifted between consciousness and delirium. When lucid, he demanded paper, frantically documenting everything the veiled woman had shown him. When the sedatives took hold, he screamed about mass graves and firing squads, about a nurse falsely accused. On the 4th day, he awoke with unnatural calm and requested access to his patients. "You're in no condition," the administrator insisted. "I know how to end this," Moreau replied with absolute certainty. His eyes held the haunted look of a man who had witnessed horrors beyond articulation, yet somehow found clarity within the nightmare. "I've seen what she showed the others. I understand what she wants." Against medical advice, Moreau returned to Section 8. The ward had transformed in his absence. The walls were covered entirely with intricate patterns, not just maps now, but names. 47 names etched into the plaster, with Marie Fournier's largest of all. The patients sat in perfect silence, no longer requiring restraints. Each man's eyes fixed on the western wall, waiting. "They've surrendered to her," Clémence whispered. "Even Dumont has stopped speaking." Moreau nodded grimly. "They've become perfect vessels, their own memories replaced by hers." He ran his fingers over the etched names. "I've confirmed everything through military archives. Each name is real. A soldier who died of typhoid in October 1870. Each man was under Marie Fournier's care. But why this hospital? Why these patients? The mass grave extends beneath this wing," Moreau explained. "When they built this hospital, they disturbed the dead. The German artillery did the rest. The constant bombardment has been cracking the foundations, opening passages to what lies beneath." He pointed to hairline fractures spiderwebbing across the floor. And these men, with minds already fractured by shell shock, became receptive to her presence. Moreau spent the day preparing. He sent telegrams to military headquarters requesting official recognition of Nurse Marie Fournier's innocence. He arranged for a proper headstone to be created. He documented every detail of the 1870 incident for the permanent record. As night fell, he dismissed the staff. "You can't stay alone," Clémence protested. "Not after what happened. I'm not leaving these men to face her alone again," Moreau said, his voice firm despite his trembling hands. "I've seen what she needs. Official acknowledgement, recognition of the wrong done to her. And if that's not enough?" Moreau's expression darkened. "Then at least I'll join them knowing I tried." He showed her the small service revolver tucked into his belt. "This is my contingency plan. Better than ending like Benoit." As the ward door closed behind Clémence, Moreau turned to his patients. 20 pairs of vacant eyes stared back. 20 men who had gradually surrendered their identities to become vessels for the dead. He arranged the official documents on a small table before the western wall: exoneration papers, recognition of service, posthumous commendations for Nurse Fournier. "I've done what I can, Marie," he announced to the empty room. "Your name is cleared, your service recognized." Dumont spoke for the first time in days, his voice no longer his own. "Words on paper cannot undo what was done to her. She was innocent. They knew it even as they fired." The temperature began to drop. The wall clock ticked toward 3:15 a.m. Moreau felt sweat freeze on his brow as he whispered, "What more does she want?" "Justice," Dumont replied, as blood began to seep from the mortar between the stones of the western wall. Blood seeped between the stones of the western wall, not dripping but flowing upward, defying gravity, as it traced the carved names of 47 soldiers. The ward transformed as 3:15 approached, the modern hospital receding like mist, revealing glimpses of a crude field station from 1870. Through these temporal tears, Moreau saw feverish men on straw pallets, heard their delirious cries as typhoid ravaged them. She was innocent, Dumont whispered, eyes fixed on something only he could fully see. They made her a scapegoat. The officers knew the water supply had been contaminated by decomposing horses upstream, but someone needed to be blamed. The other patients began chanting in perfect unison. Witness, remember, justice. The air grew so cold that Moreau's breath crystallized before him, falling to the floor as tiny shards of ice. The western wall shimmered and became transparent, revealing a ghastly tableau. Marie Fournier standing against a blood-soaked wall, 7 French officers raising rifles. Their commander, a captain with silver-streaked hair, giving the order to fire. "This is what we all see," Dumont said, his voice blending with those of the other patients. This moment, repeated endlessly. Her death, their guilt, our witness. The apparition of Marie Fournier turned toward Moreau, her veil lifting to reveal not a face but a mirror. In its reflection, he saw himself wearing the uniform of the captain who had ordered her execution. "No," Moreau gasped, backing away. "I am not him. I am not responsible." "Not you," Dumont said, "but your blood." The commander was Lieutenant Colonel Henri Moreau, your grandfather. The revelation struck like physical force. Moreau staggered, memories that were not his own flooding his consciousness. His grandfather, a young officer during the Franco-Prussian War, had never spoken of his service, had taken his own life in 1880 after years of deteriorating mental health. The guilty officer's bloodline always returns to this place, Dumont continued, blood now streaming from his eyes. The previous physicians, all descendants of the firing squad. She calls you here, generation after generation, to witness her innocence. Around the ward, patients began convulsing, foam flecking their lips. Moreau reached for his revolver, but his hands froze mid-motion as Marie Fournier's apparition approached. The mirror face reflected his features, distorting, aging, becoming his grandfather's visage. "What do you want?" Moreau screamed, fighting against invisible restraints. "I've acknowledged your innocence. I've documented the injustice." Dumont answered, his voice now entirely feminine. "Justice requires sacrifice. The guilty gave me to oblivion. I will take what was taken." The patients rose from their beds in unison, surrounding Moreau. Their eyes had become empty sockets, blood streaming down their cheeks. Through the transparent wall, he could now see the mass grave beneath. 47 rotting corpses and 1 nurse's body, riddled with bullet holes but somehow animate, its dead hands reaching upward. "I cannot undo what he did," Moreau pleaded. "But you can join us." The voice came from Dumont and all the patients simultaneously. "Become the witness who never leaves, the memory that never fades." The floor beneath Moreau cracked open. Cold, dead hands emerged from the darkness below, grasping his ankles. The patients closed in, their fingers clawing at his face, his eyes. As consciousness faded, Moreau saw Marie Fournier's true face at last, not monstrous but human, twisted with the agony of unjust death and forgotten sacrifice. "You do not treat the forgotten," whispered the chorus of voices. "You join them." Dawn broke over the Verdun hospital. When orderlies finally forced the sealed door of Section 8, they found an impossible scene. 20 patients dead in their beds, faces serene despite their empty eye sockets. Of Capitaine Moreau, they found only his uniform and journal, the final entry reading, "I remember her now. I remember them all. Their names will never be forgotten again." The psychiatric ward was abandoned, its door sealed with concrete and iron. 2 weeks later, a German artillery shell scored a direct hit on the hospital, destroying every wing except Section 8, which remained untouched, its western wall still weeping blood at precisely 3:15 each morning. Military records from July 1916 note the mysterious disappearance of Capitaine Lucien Moreau, officially listed as missing, presumed killed in action. His personal effects were sent to his family in Paris, along with a letter commending his dedication to his patients, a letter that arrived on October 12th, the anniversary of Marie Fournier's execution, at exactly 3:15 in the afternoon. If this tale from the War Maestro's archive has infected your dreams, check your watch. If it stopped at 3:15, you're already one of us. Subscribe to receive more classified military horror files directly from the field hospitals of history. Ring that notification bell. You'll want to know when our next ward of forgotten soldiers opens its doors. Remember, some hospital beds remain eternally occupied, patiently waiting for new witnesses.